Somewhere in the night sky tonight, there's a star that used to be there and isn't anymore. Not a star that moved, not a star that is too far away to see, a star that was caught on camera, glowing bright and clear. And today, if you point the best telescopes on Earth at that exact same spot, you find nothing. No light, no explosion cloud, no leftover glow. Just empty black space, like someone reached up and erased a hole in the sky. This is not a made-up story. It is not a scary movie plot. It is a real thing that real scientists have found, and they still do not have a full answer for it. Some of these missing stars were caught in photos taken over 70 years ago. Since then, astronomers have taken new photos of the exact same spots, using tools far more powerful than anything from the 1950s. And in those new photos, some stars just are not there. That should not be possible. Stars do not sneak away quietly. When a huge star dies, it usually goes out with a bang so bright it can be seen from halfway across the universe. Scientists call this a supernova, and it is one of the most violent, most obvious events in the whole sky. You cannot miss it. It is like a firework the size of a solar system. So when a star just vanishes, with no bang, no flash, and no leftover cloud, it breaks the rules that scientists have trusted for decades. And here is the part that makes this whole thing even stranger. This is not something scientists just started looking for last week. The proof has been sitting in dusty old boxes in observatory basements for over 70 years, waiting for someone to notice. Old photographs of the sky, taken long before anyone had a computer, sat in storage for decades, completely unread, because nobody had a fast enough way to compare millions of tiny dots of light against each other. It took modern computers and a group of scientists willing to do something nobody had really tried before, to finally catch what those old photos had been quietly proving the whole time. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly how astronomers caught this happening, what the leading ideas are for where these stars went, and why some scientists think this tiny mystery might be a clue about something much, much bigger going on in the universe. So stick around, because this gets stranger the deeper you go. The photo that doesn't match. Here is where this whole mystery starts. Not with a fancy new space telescope, but with old dusty photographs. Back in the 1950s, long before computers or digital cameras, astronomers used giant glass photographic plates to take pictures of the night sky. Think of these like enormous black and white photo negatives. Teams of scientists spent years pointing telescopes at huge sections of the sky and capturing everything they could see, star by star, on plate after plate after plate. Nobody back then had any way to guess that those old photos would one day become evidence in a mystery. Fast forward to today. Modern telescopes can scan the sky in far more detail than anything from the 1950s. So a small group of scientists had an idea. What if they took those old photographs and lined them up against brand new pictures of the exact same patch of sky? If a star showed up clearly in the old photo but was completely gone in the new one, that would mean something happened to it. Something big enough to make it vanish, but not big enough, or not the right kind, to leave any evidence behind. This became a real science project. It has a name. It is called Vasco, which stands for Vanishing and Appearing Sources during a century of observations. A scientist named Beatriz Villarroel started it, working with a team of astronomers from all over the world. Their whole goal was simple to explain, even if the work behind it was not simple at all. Find stars that used to be there and are not there anymore. Picture it like this. Imagine your whole town got its photo taken in 1950, everybody standing together in one giant group picture. Now imagine your town gets photographed again today, standing in those same exact spots. If you compared the two photos and found a person clearly standing in the old one, but their spot in the new photo was just empty ground, with no note saying they moved, no funeral, no record of what happened to them, you would want answers. That is basically what these scientists were doing, except with hundreds of millions of stars instead of people. And here's the part that should stop you for a second. This team did not just check a few stars, they checked about 600 million points of light. 600 million. That is more than the population of every country in Europe put together. Out of all of those, they narrowed it down, step by step, using computers first and then human eyes, to a much smaller group that looked truly strange. And in the end, after years of careful checking, they were left with roughly 100 stars that seemed to be genuinely gone. No trace, no leftover glow, no record of an explosion, just gone. That number might sound small compared to 600 million, but think about what it actually means. These are not stars that were too faint to see clearly the first time. They were bright enough and clear enough to be caught on camera on purpose decades ago. Now they are simply not there. Remember that empty patch of sky we talked about at the very start of this video? The one that looks like someone reached up and erased a hole where a star used to shine. This is exactly where that comes from. Real, checked, double-checked, and triple-checked cases where a bright point of light on an old photograph has nothing sitting in that same spot today. No dimmer version of the star, no cloud of gas from an explosion, nothing at all. If a story like this can be true, and if scientists have already caught real cases of it happening, you have to wonder how many more are out there that nobody has checked yet. This Vasco project has only looked closely at a small slice of the whole sky so far. The rest of the sky, the huge majority of it, has not even been searched this carefully yet. Before we go further, I want to ask you for something, and I promise it is not just the usual request. If you want to keep learning about real space mysteries like this one, explained in plain, simple words instead of confusing science talk, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I read through the actual research papers, the real published science, so you do not have to dig through pages of complicated language just to find out what is going on. That is the whole point of this channel. Real discoveries, explained the way a friend would explain them to you, so if that sounds like your kind of thing, stick around, because there is a lot more coming. Now back to the mystery. If real stars are truly disappearing without an explosion, without a fade out, without anything, the next question is obvious. How does that even happen? To understand that, we need to look at how astronomers actually go about proving a star is missing, because it turns out that part of the story is just as wild as the missing stars themselves. How do you actually lose a star? Here is a question worth sitting with for a second. If a star is one of the biggest, brightest, most powerful things that exists, how could anyone possibly lose track of one? Stars are not small. Our own sun is a giant ball of fire, 93 million miles away. And it is still bright enough to light up an entire planet during the day. Stars are, by definition, things that shine. So the idea that scientists could find a star clearly glowing in an old photo and then find nothing there today sounds almost impossible on the surface. To really understand how big a deal this is, think about just how many stars are out there in the first place. Scientists estimate there are more stars in the universe than grains of sand on every single beach and desert on planet Earth combined. That is an almost impossible number to picture. And yet, out of that unimaginable pile of shining points of light, scientists were able to spot roughly 100 specific ones that used to be there and now are not, simply by comparing old photographs to new ones. Finding that handful of missing stars is a little like noticing that 100 specific grains of sand went missing from a specific stretch of beach, just by comparing a photo from decades ago to a photo taken today. That level of detail is exactly why this discovery caught so much attention among scientists in the first place. But here is the thing. Proving that a star is truly gone and not just hiding, moved, or misread takes a lot of careful detective work. The Vasco team could not just glance at 2 photos and call it a day. They had to rule out every single boring, normal explanation first. The first thing they had to check was whether the star had simply moved. Stars are not glued in place. They drift slowly through space, and over 70 years, some stars can shift position enough that they show up in a slightly different spot in a newer photo. So the team had to check nearby areas around each missing star, just in case it had wandered a little and was hiding a few pixels away. Next, they had to rule out camera problems. The old photographic plates from the 1950s were not perfect. Sometimes dust, scratches, or chemical marks on the old glass plates could look like a star that was not really there at all. So scientists had to compare each candidate across several different old photos, not just one, to make sure they were not chasing a smudge. They also had to check for stars that simply got dimmer over time instead of vanishing completely. Some stars naturally brighten and dim in cycles. If a star faded just enough to fall below what modern cameras could detect at that distance, it might look gone in the new photo, even though it is technically still shining, just too weak to notice from here. None of that checking was quick or easy. Comparing millions of tiny dots of light by eye would take one person several lifetimes to finish. So the team built special computer programs to do the first round of checking, scanning through hundreds of millions of points of light and flagging anything that looked even a little bit odd. Once the computer narrowed the huge pile down to a more manageable list, real human scientists stepped in to look at each one with their own eyes, one by one, making sure the computer had not simply been fooled by a scratch on the glass or a smudge of dust on an old lens. It is a strange mix of very old-fashioned photographs and very modern computer power, working together to solve a mystery that neither one could have solved on its own. After clearing out all of those normal explanations, the team was left with a small group of stars that truly seemed to disappear with no simple reason behind it. That is the part that should give you chills. These are not smudges. These are not sensor errors. These are cases where a real, solid, bright point of light in an old photograph simply has nothing where it used to be. Here is where it gets interesting. A missing star is strange enough on its own, but scientists have also caught cases where something even weirder happened. In some of the old photographic plates, they found spots of light that showed up in one single photo and were never seen before or after. Not in the old records, and not in the new ones either. Not a star that faded away over decades, but a flash that appeared and disappeared in a single moment, captured completely by accident on old film that nobody was checking for anything unusual at the time. Think about that for a second. Somebody in the 1950s pointed a camera at the sky, took a picture, and captured a flash of light that nobody even noticed until researchers dug through the plates decades later with fresh eyes and modern computers. Whatever caused that flash happened once, briefly, and left no other clue behind. And it gets even stranger than a single flash. On one photograph, taken on a single night back in April of 1950, researchers found 9 separate points of light that all showed up or disappeared on that exact same photo, at the exact same time, in the exact same small patch of sky. Not spread out over years, not one at a time. 9 of them together on one piece of old film. Nobody has a clean, simple explanation for why 9 points of light would all do something so unusual at once, in the same tiny corner of the sky, on the same single night, decades before anyone would even think to look for it. So now we have 2 strange puzzles tangled together. Stars that disappear slowly over decades with nothing left behind, and single flashes of light that show up once and vanish forever. Neither one fits neatly into what astronomers expect from a normal, well-behaved star. This is exactly why scientists have not settled on one single answer yet. There are a few different ideas floating around for what could explain the vanishing stars, and each one takes you down a completely different path. One idea is fairly calm and reasonable. Another idea involves one of the most violent and mysterious objects in the entire universe. To understand how a star could disappear without exploding, we need to look at what is actually possible out there in deep space. Where could they have gone? Let's go through the leading ideas one at a time, because each one tells a very different story about what might be happening out there. None of these ideas is a wild guess pulled out of thin air. Each one is based on something scientists have already observed happening somewhere in the universe, at least once. The real question is not whether these things can happen. It is how often they happen, and how many of the missing stars from those old photographs can actually be explained by each one. That is exactly the kind of puzzle that keeps astronomers up at night, in the best possible way. The first idea is simple and, honestly, kind of comforting. Some of these stars might not be gone at all. They might just be hiding. Space is not empty and clean the way a lot of people picture it. It is actually full of huge clouds of gas and dust floating between stars and galaxies. This dust comes from old dying stars, leftover material from galaxy formation, and all sorts of cosmic debris built up over billions of years. If a thick enough cloud of that dust happens to drift in front of a star, or if a star is born deep inside a dusty region, its light can get blocked almost completely from our point of view. Scientists have already caught a real example of this happening, and it is honestly one of the coolest space stories in recent years. There is a distant galaxy that astronomers nicknamed a ghost galaxy, because it kept playing hide and seek with our telescopes. It first showed up as a faint, blurry blob using ground-based telescopes. Then, when scientists pointed the Hubble Space Telescope at that exact same spot, the galaxy completely vanished from view, like it was never there at all. For years, that was confusing. How can something show up clearly in one telescope and then disappear in another? The answer came when a newer, more powerful telescope called the James Webb Space Telescope, or JWST for short, was finally able to look at that same location using infrared light, which is a type of light our eyes cannot see, but that can pass through dust much more easily than regular visible light. And there it was. The ghost galaxy was real the whole time. It had just been wrapped in such a thick blanket of cosmic dust that older telescopes simply could not see through it. Researchers at the University of Texas described this galaxy as a real monster, even though it looked like nothing more than a tiny faint smudge. Despite being almost invisible, it turned out to be quietly forming hundreds of brand new stars every single year, completely hidden from view the whole time. One scientist on the team said that finding something that active barely showing up, even in the most sensitive pictures we have ever taken, was incredibly exciting, because it means there could be a whole hidden population of galaxies out there that we have never even noticed. If an entire galaxy can hide behind dust that well, it is not a stretch to think individual stars could do the same thing, especially stars sitting in the thickest, dustiest parts of space. Under this theory, some of the missing stars from the old photos are not destroyed. They are simply behind a curtain that older cameras could never see past. Think of it like trying to see a candle burning inside a thick fog. The candle has not gone out. It is still burning exactly the same as before. But if the fog is thick enough, and you're standing far enough away, all you see is darkness where that little flame should be. Old telescopes from decades ago were only able to see the kind of light our eyes can see, which is exactly the kind of light dust is best at blocking. Newer telescopes like JWST can see a different kind of light, one that slides through fog and dust almost like it is not even there, which is exactly how that ghost galaxy finally got caught after fooling 2 other telescopes first. But dust cannot explain everything. Some of the missing stars sit in parts of the sky that are not particularly dusty at all, which means something else has to be going on. That brings us to the second idea, and this one is much darker in every sense of the word. Some massive stars might not explode when they die. Instead, they might collapse in on themselves so completely and so suddenly that they turn straight into a black hole, skipping the explosion step entirely. This is not just a guess. Scientists have already caught this happening once in real time. Back in 2009, astronomers were watching a massive star, about 25 times heavier than our sun, sitting in a distant galaxy. Suddenly, that star brightened dramatically, shining as bright as 1,000,000 suns combined, exactly the kind of buildup you would expect right before a supernova explosion. Everyone watching assumed they were about to witness a huge, violent blast. Instead, the star just faded away. No explosion, no flash. It got dimmer and dimmer until there was nothing left to see at all. When astronomers pointed some of the most powerful telescopes on Earth and in space at that exact spot afterward, they found nothing there. No leftover star, no visible remains, just empty space where a giant star used to be. Scientists now believe that star experienced what they call a failed supernova. Instead of blasting itself apart in a giant explosion, its core collapsed so fast and so completely that it swallowed the entire star into a black hole before an explosion even had the chance to happen. Think of it like a balloon that does not pop when it gets too full of air. Instead, it just crumples in on itself and disappears into nothing all at once with barely a sound. If this can happen to one giant star, it is reasonable to think it could be happening across the universe on a much bigger scale. Massive stars quietly collapsing into black holes, leaving behind nothing but an invisible patch of extremely strong gravity where a bright, shining star used to be. No fireworks, no fanfare, just silence. Here is what makes this idea even harder to prove or disprove. A black hole does not glow. It does not give off light of its own. The only way scientists can even guess that one is sitting in a certain spot is by watching how it pulls on things around it. The same way you could tell an invisible person was standing on a trampoline just by watching the fabric sink down around them, even though you cannot see who is standing there. If a star quietly turns into a black hole out in a dark, empty patch of space, with nothing nearby to feel its pull, there might be almost no way to notice it happened at all, other than one simple fact. The star that used to be shining there just is not shining anymore. There's a third idea too, a little less dramatic but still important. Some of the missing stars might genuinely still be exactly where they always were, just too faint for us to notice anymore. Stars change brightness over time. Some pulse and flicker in cycles that can last decades. If a star that used to shine brightly slowly dimmed down over the years, it could easily drop below what modern telescopes are even bothering to look for in that spot, especially if nobody expected anything interesting to be there in the first place. Think of it like a porch light on a timer, set so far in the future that nobody remembers exactly when it is supposed to switch off. If you walked past that porch every night for years, you might not even notice the light slowly getting weaker and weaker. Then one night, you walk by and it is simply dark, and unless you happened to be watching closely the whole time, you would have no way of knowing whether it burned out suddenly or had been fading for years. Some of these missing stars might be exactly that kind of slow fade, just spread out over a scale of decades instead of days. So now you have three totally different explanations sitting side by side. Some missing stars are probably just hiding behind dust. Some might have quietly collapsed into black holes without ever exploding, and some might simply be fading stars that got too dim to notice. Nobody can say for certain which explanation fits each individual missing star, and that uncertainty is exactly why this mystery has stuck around for so long. But here's the question that should really get your brain turning. If a single dusty galaxy could completely fool two major space telescopes before finally being caught by a third, how much more is hiding out there in the rest of the universe that we simply have not looked closely enough to find yet? To really understand how big this question gets, we need to zoom all the way out, past individual stars, past single galaxies, and look at the two biggest, strangest forces in the entire universe. The universe is playing hide and seek. Here is something that might genuinely surprise you. Everything you have ever seen in the night sky, every star, every planet, every galaxy, all of it put together, makes up only a tiny piece of what actually exists in the universe. Scientists estimate that regular matter, the stuff that makes up stars, planets, you and me, only adds up to somewhere around 5% of everything in the universe. 5%? That means about 95% of the universe is made of something we cannot see directly at all. To put that in a way that is easier to picture, imagine looking at a giant ocean, but you are only ever allowed to see the very top of one single wave. That tiny sliver of water you can see is a lot like regular matter, the stars and planets and everything else humans have ever studied or photographed. The rest of that entire ocean, stretching down deeper than you could ever swim, is still out there the whole time, doing most of the real work of holding everything together, even though nobody has ever actually seen it with their own eyes. So what is the rest of it? Mostly two things. Dark matter and dark energy, and even though both have the word dark in their names, they behave in almost completely opposite ways. Dark matter does not glow, does not reflect light, and cannot be seen with any telescope we have ever built. But scientists know it is out there because of the way it affects gravity. Galaxies spin so fast that they really should tear themselves apart, based only on the gravity of the stars we can actually see. Something invisible is holding those galaxies together, wrapping around them like an invisible skeleton made of gravity. Without it, galaxies would have flown apart billions of years ago. This is not just an old theory sitting in a textbook. In January of 2026, a team of scientists, including researchers from the University of California, Riverside, released one of the most detailed maps of dark matter ever made. They used the James Webb Space Telescope to study a patch of sky in the constellation Sextans, an area a little more than twice the size of the full moon. Inside that one patch, they mapped out nearly 800,000 galaxies. The new map showed dark matter forming huge web-like structures, thick clumps connected by long, faint threads stretching across almost unimaginable distances, with regular visible galaxies lining up almost perfectly along those same invisible threads. To put the size of this new map in perspective, it included about 10 times more galaxies than earlier maps made using ground-based telescopes, and about twice as many as an earlier map made using the Hubble Space Telescope back in 2007. In other words, the newest telescope in space is not just showing us more stars. It is showing us, in far greater detail than ever before, just how much of the universe has been sitting there invisible this entire time, quietly shaping everything we can actually see. Now here comes dark energy, and this one is even stranger. If dark matter is like glue, holding galaxies together, dark energy is the exact opposite. It is a mysterious force that seems to be pushing the entire universe apart, and not just pushing it apart slowly and steadily either. Back in the late 1990s, astronomers discovered something that genuinely shocked them. Galaxies are not just drifting apart from each other, which scientists had already expected since the Big Bang. They are speeding up as they move apart. Something out there is stepping on the gas pedal of the whole universe, and to this day, nobody fully understands what that something actually is. Here is a simple way to picture what expanding space actually looks like, because it is a little different from what most people imagine. Picture a balloon with small dots drawn all over it in marker. Now imagine slowly blowing that balloon up bigger and bigger. As the balloon expands, every single dot moves farther away from every other dot, all at the same time. No dot is the center, no dot is special. They are all just getting farther apart from each other because the surface underneath all of them is stretching. That is roughly what is happening to galaxies across the universe, except instead of a balloon, it is space itself that keeps stretching, carrying galaxies farther apart as it grows. And here is the part that connects it back to dark energy. Something is making that balloon inflate faster and faster instead of at a steady pace, and scientists still do not fully know what that something actually is. Here's why this matters so much for our missing star mystery. As the universe keeps expanding, and that expansion keeps getting faster, distant galaxies are moving away from us at higher and higher speeds. Eventually, the light coming from those faraway places will not be able to catch up to us anymore. The stars have not necessarily disappeared. The space between us and them is stretching faster than their light can cross it. Their light quite literally runs out of road before it ever reaches our eyes. Think about what you are really looking at every single night when you glance up at the stars. You are never seeing the universe as it looks right now. You are seeing light that left its source years ago, sometimes thousands of years ago, sometimes far longer than that. Some of the stars twinkling above you tonight might have already changed completely, or might not even exist anymore by the time their light finally makes it all the way to your eyes. And as space keeps expanding faster and faster, more and more of what is out there is slowly slipping past the edge of what we will ever be able to see or reach, not because it vanished, but because it became permanently out of range. So when scientists find stars missing compared to old photographs, they now have to ask themselves an uncomfortable question. How much of that gap comes from dust quietly hiding things from view? How much comes from massive stars quietly collapsing into black holes? And how much of it comes from the universe itself expanding so fast that entire regions of space are slipping beyond anything we could ever observe again, no matter how good our telescopes get? This is exactly why the last couple of years have felt like such a wild stretch for space research. The same telescope, responsible for finding hidden dust-covered galaxies and mapping dark matter in incredible detail, has also been finding other galaxies that formed far earlier and far bigger than current science expected them to. Some astronomers have started calling these impossible galaxies because, based on our current understanding of how the universe grows and ages, they simply should not exist this early in cosmic history. To understand why that is so strange, think about how long it normally takes to build something huge. A massive skyscraper does not go up overnight. It takes years of steady work, floor by floor, before it is finished. Scientists always assumed galaxies worked the same way, taking a very long, slow, steady climb to grow big and bright after the universe began. But JWST has been finding fully formed, massive, bright galaxies from extremely early in the universe's history, almost like finding a finished 60-story skyscraper standing tall in a photo of a city that, according to the timeline, should have only just started pouring the foundation. Nobody is entirely sure yet how galaxies manage to grow up that fast. Put all of that together, and a bigger picture starts to form. Our models for how the universe grows, ages, and behaves might have real gaps in them. Not a tiny rounding error, but something bigger than that, sitting quietly underneath everything we thought we understood. Oh, what happens next? So where does all of this leave us right now? Astronomers are not treating this as a closed case. They are actively hunting for better answers, using tools that did not even exist a decade ago. The James Webb Space Telescope carries two instruments that matter enormously here. One is a near-infrared camera, which lets it peer straight through thick clouds of cosmic dust that would completely block a normal telescope. The other is tuned to pick up heat signatures from cooler, dimmer objects, exactly the kind of faint leftover glow you might expect if a star quietly collapsed into a black hole instead of exploding outward. Together, these tools are being pointed back at the regions where stars have gone missing, running what is basically a cosmic detective investigation, piece by piece, trying to figure out whether these stars are hidden, transformed into something else, or genuinely, permanently gone. This kind of follow-up work takes real patience. A single spot in the sky might need to be checked with more than one instrument, sometimes more than once, before scientists feel confident enough to say what actually happened there. It is nothing like the movies, where a scientist looks through a telescope for a few seconds and suddenly announces the answer. Real discoveries like this one are built slowly, one careful check at a time, by teams of people comparing notes across different countries and different telescopes, often over the course of years. But this telescope will not be working alone for much longer. Two other major missions are expected to play a huge role in cracking this open even further. The European Space Agency's Euclid Space Telescope, which is already up and running, was built specifically to map the large-scale structure of the universe and study dark matter and dark energy across a much wider slice of the sky than JWST typically covers at once. And NASA's Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope, which is on track to launch soon, will be able to scan enormous regions of space all at once, giving scientists a wide-angle partner to JWST's incredibly detailed close-up view. Where JWST zooms in with pinpoint precision on small patches of sky, Roman will zoom out, scanning huge areas at once, looking for the same kinds of oddities: missing star clusters, unexpected gaps, patterns that do not fit our current understanding. And here is something genuinely cool. You do not have to be a professional scientist to be part of this search. The Vasco project, the same one that first found those missing stars in old photographs, actually lets regular people help comb through the images online, comparing old and new sky photos to flag anything unusual. Thousands of ordinary people, including students, have already taken part, looking through real astronomical data with their own eyes, hunting for the exact same kind of vanishing stars we have been talking about this whole video. There is even a version built specifically for kids, so younger fans of space can take part in real scientific work without needing a fancy degree first. The Roman telescope is not some far-off promise either. As of right now, it is scheduled to launch by the end of this month, lifting off from Florida on top of a powerful rocket, heading out to join JWST in that same quiet, stable region of space nearly 1 million miles from Earth. Once it settles in and finishes checking all of its equipment, it will start scanning huge stretches of sky, covering an area far bigger in a single picture than JWST usually looks at, hunting for exactly the kind of oddities we have been talking about this whole video. That means we are not talking about some experiment for the distant future. We are talking about weeks, not decades, before an entirely new set of eyes joins the search for missing stars. Here's the thing I think gets lost in a lot of coverage about mysteries like this one. This is not a scary story. It is not a sign that something is wrong with the universe or a reason to be worried about anything. It is actually one of the most exciting things happening in science today, because it means we finally have tools sensitive enough to notice a gap that was always there, quietly hiding in plain sight, just waiting for someone with a powerful enough telescope to catch it. Think back to where we started. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and assumed the stars were fixed points, permanent and unchanging forever. Then telescopes showed us that stars are born and stars eventually die. Then modern astronomy showed us that the universe itself is expanding, stretching wider every single day. Now, right now, in the middle of all this new research, we are learning that even our best, most trusted old maps of the sky may have been missing real stars this entire time, and we are only now building the tools sharp enough to notice. Every layer we peel back seems to reveal another layer hiding underneath it. That is not a flaw in how we study the universe. That is simply what real discovery looks like, one honest surprise after another. It is a little like exploring a house you thought you already knew every inch of, only to find a door behind a bookshelf that leads to a whole extra room nobody told you about. You're not upset that the house turned out to be bigger and stranger than you thought. You're curious. You want to see what else is hiding behind the next wall. That is basically where astronomers find themselves right now with the entire universe. Every time a new tool gets built, another hidden room shows up, and there's no sign yet that we are anywhere close to running out of doors. So here's what I want you to take away from tonight. If the sky happens to be clear where you are, go outside later and look up. Every single point of light you see is old news, light that left its source years ago, sometimes centuries ago, sometimes far longer than that. And now you also know that scattered across the deeper universe, far beyond anything your eyes could ever catch on their own, there really are stars that once shone clearly in old photographs and are not there anymore. Some are probably hiding behind thick clouds of dust, some may have quietly collapsed into black holes without ever exploding, and some may simply have slipped past the edge of what light will ever be able to reach us again. Nobody has the final answer yet. Not even the scientists running these investigations right now, with the best equipment humanity has ever built. But that is exactly why this story is worth following closely over the next few years. Because whichever explanation turns out to be true, or however many of these explanations turn out to be true all at once, it is going to change how we understand the past, present, and future of the universe we live in. If this got you thinking even half as much as it got me thinking while researching it, do me a favor and hit that like button. And if you have not subscribed yet, now is a great time, since new videos like this one come out regularly. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next one. Before you go, I want to know what you think. Out of everything we talked about tonight, dust hiding stars from view, stars quietly collapsing into black holes, or the universe itself expanding so fast that light can no longer keep up, which explanation do you think is closest to the truth? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one, and if you want to keep exploring what our newest telescopes have been finding, I have another video linked right here that you're going to want to watch next.